there's an education problem with the general public. There's a lack of education awareness with the Colorado General Assembly on multiple occasions. They don't really realize how in-depth Colorado Parks and Wildlife is when it comes to what they do for each species of animals out of that 961 species. And the interesting thing about that is the 78 game species that there are that you can purchase an opportunity to pursue, pay for all of that 961. There's not another system on the planet that works like that, to where they say the benefits of appropriately managing an abundant resource in a highly regulated fashion of a small percentage, less than 10%. It's probably somewhere 7.5% or 8% of the wildlife that is here, and the ability to be able to pursue that wildlife pays for the funding for the other 90%.
And funding outside of that.
Exactly.
I mean, a lot of it goes into habitat restorations, habitat improvements. It's mind-blowing if you actually look at all the different hats that CPW wears and manages.
It's gotten to the point now where I think they're almost getting to the point where they're managing too many things because of the human side of it, the public side of it. You know, I joke with some of my game wardens that I deal with, and I'm like, you guys aren't wildlife managers anymore, you're people managers. You know, and in the summertime when you're trying to do, let's just say, deer work.
That is the biggest species that they're trying to manage.
Yeah,
though, when it gets
it is
straight down
because they're out
crazy.
there like locusts on a cornfield.
Yeah,
and the average person, it's not being detrimental or confrontational or derogatory. The average person doesn't treat the natural resources like the average steward does. They just don't. You know, I mean, how many times do people in the city turn around and say, I have a beautiful yard, and every morning I go out there and there's a pile of crap in my yard because somebody let their dog do it. Well, people do the same thing on the landscape. They leave their trash. They leave their feces. They're not
leave
safe
their
to
dog's feces bagged up on the side of the trail. It's like,
I mean, they leave their
what are we
fires
doing?
burning. They leave their trash outside. They leave their camp. So people disrupt the wildlife and habitat and natural resources more than wildlife.
That's a great point, because I think they do it more than even hunters, because if you're hunting, especially archery or even in rifle season, you're trying to be quiet. You're trying to have the least amount of impact on the land that you possibly can so you can be successful in your harvest. Yeah. Right? And to take it even a step further, even if you do harvest something, you're normally going with a group of people. So you're then turning around and making that impact still the same for your buddies. It's not like one, I'm done and now it's time to party.
Right.
Right. So I think that if you strap a boombox on,
I was just going to say that.
Right. Or you're doing 25 miles an hour on a mountain bike on a trail, or you're taking your toddlers out and they're throwing rocks and yelling and screaming. I mean, all that sort of stuff impacts wildlife. Just having your dog off leash impacts wildlife. I know it's a huge, huge issue right here in Evergreen. Everybody has a dog. We have so much beautiful open space. You know, not many people put them on a leash unless their dog is a problem. But your dog is still a problem, even if he's roaming, especially during fawning season. Because the moment that doe takes off and leaves a fawn far enough, it's a dead animal. You're hunting at that point.
Funny you mentioned the boombox deal. I'll tell you a quick story. About 10 years ago, we were guiding hunters down.
I guess they're not boomboxes anymore. They're JBL
whatever the hell they are.
Bluetooth speakers.
You remember that, was it Gone in 60 Seconds when they were driving that Hummer down through the parking structure and the Russian guy and the black guy were in there, and the music that was going on in the background, I don't even know the name of it. But
it's been a while since I've seen it.
Yeah, but you could look it up and find it. But that was the song that was playing, and I'm thinking, what the hell was that noise? And we were actually trying to call the bull elk in. And I kept getting louder and louder. It was that exact song when they were driving down through the parking structure, when that snake crawled up in that guy's lap.
Right.
And all of a sudden, here comes this mountain bike, like 30 miles an hour. And we heard it for like a mile and a half, like for 5 or 6 minutes. And all of a sudden, it was the same deal. And then he just went along, and we heard it for another mile and a half to go the opposite direction. The elk still came in. I think he waited to see what the hell that noise was.
Sure.
But to your point, we don't think as a community, as a society, that our interaction interferes with anything other than what we see or what we're part of. And I think that sportsmen and women, as a general rule, are a little bit more cognizant on what they do for disruption on the landscape, where the average person not necessarily is. Whether the kids are throwing and chopping the hell out of a tree in camp, or whether you got a boom box, or your dogs are barking, or you're turning around and having a big loud party on national forest land, or you're riding your mountain bike and you got a great big giant,
Well, even to take it a step further, and it's a public golf course. It's owned by Denver Mountain Parks, the golf course right here, which I'm very fortunate to live very close to. Mm-hmm. We have magnificent herds of elk that live kind of on and off that golf course, right? Mm-hmm. It's a great spot to hang out. There's some water there. Mm-hmm. There's, nice lush green grass. That's probably got God knows what kind of chemicals that are on it.
Yeah, exactly.
But you can mark your clock at about, whatever time the sprinklers come on the ninth green, meet me on the ninth green at this time. All of a sudden I'll have a stampede in my yard because those elk or deer or whatever's on the golf course is running from sprinklers, right? Uh-huh. So even that just has an impact on wildlife. So you might not even be a hunter. Everybody's impacting wildlife is what I'm saying when it comes right down to it. And to turn around and say that hunters are the only people that impact wildlife in a negative way, they're probably impacting wildlife in the most positive way when it comes to the stealthness, the sound, the management of the species. And then you're impacting wildlife by getting in your car and driving.
You're impacting wildlife by getting in your car and driving. But keep in mind, as I mentioned, hunting season lasts for approximately 6 to 12 weeks per year, depending on what species and where you go. Recreation season lasts 365 days a year. Mm-hmm. What I used to see as a younger man was very little outside activity outside of hunting season. You'd see a snowmobiler or maybe a cross-country skier or maybe a snowshoer. Now, you go out in the middle of January, it's 12 degrees below zero outside, and you see people doing everything.